Serbian and to the rest of the other sites field members, thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity for stepping in place para kay Dr. Singh. He is a little tied up during the, how do you say, the weekend. And I'd like to, of course, thank Sir Benji. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it for having me on your event. And yes, I'm very much excited to discuss cyber defense. This is something that we have been, in a sense, needing, or this is one of the, how do I say, much needed items in the current landscape that we have here in the Philippines, especially pagdating sa atin mga ahensya, sa mga gobyerno, pati rin sa mga pribadong sektor. Dahil medyo marami din ang mga nakukuhan natin mga cyber breaches over the past couple of years, especially during the COVID period. So once again, thank you very much for having me on the event. And shall we kick it off?
All right, you're welcome, Mr. Mark. By the way, before we proceed, we would like to remind our audiences to share our live stream using the hashtag Hknl2022, hashtag Hknl2022, hashtag Sitesville, and hashtag CompTIA. You can copy and paste these hashtags on the description box.
So this will be our official hashtag for this topic. Make sure to have it all when you share this event. Winners will be announced after Mr. Mark's presentation. So, Mr. Mark, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'll try to get this one as quick as possible. It's not going to be easy to discuss cybersecurity, at least defense, in just an hour. This is typically something that we take over for quite a period of time. But before we actually go for our viewers, there are a couple of items that I would like first everyone to be aware of. And of course, the understanding of what we mean by data. Okay, so data basically is considered a commodity online and offline, both for legal and illegal actors. Now, as a lot of people probably have, how do I say, heard of the term, data is pretty much the new oil or the gold that we have, especially in the cyber world that we're, how do I say, again. And this is one of the things that a lot of cyber criminals basically try to get hold of. Now, data can be categorized in so many different forms. This could be private information, that's data, such as your birth date, your middle name, your gender, your wife's name, your parents' name, and so many other factors. And through this particular data, in a number of, how do you say, certain instances, this particular information could actually be capitalized on in performing certain cyber crimes. Now, as we, I'm not so sure if the audience is quite familiar with, but in the Philippines, we basically have quite a number of laws pertaining to electronic data, but there are actually two specific laws that we should take into very close consideration. One, of course, is Republic Act 10173, okay, which is a Data Privacy Act of 2012. And we also have Republic Act 10175, which is also the Cybercrime Prevention Act, similarly, of 2012. Now, of course, with these particular laws, there have always been reasons, and one of the primary reasons there, in terms of the sudden need of this, and you might be surprised that this is not actually an old law. This is just a 1 decade old law, 10 years for that matter, is because of the cyber breaches and the cyber issues, and one in particular, which was the love bug that we had, which created a pretty big international stir some years back prior to 2012. And this actually prompted the need and the necessity for a particular law to focus primarily on cybercrime. Now, with regards, and there are a couple of other terms that I'd like other resources, or at least the audience, to be familiar with. We have the term cybersecurity, defense, and attack. Again, it's a very important thing to understand. When we talk about security, we primarily refer to security as the ability to be pretty much free from dangers or threats. Security can be different forms. You could have security fences, okay, preventing people either coming in to a certain property or even leaving a certain secure area. Defense, on the other hand, basically is a form of, how do I say, a form of restricting or restraining, okay, certain or resisting certain attacks that happen within an organization. And again, these terms are pretty much general terms that were adapted in the cyber realm. Attacks, on the other hand, basically are the methods or the ways that certain individuals would be able to perform illegal, okay, actions in terms of obtaining certain information and going to certain places that they aren't supposed to be. Now, a lot of organizations, unfortunately, and even up to this generation now, and specifically here in the Philippines, hasn't been really prioritizing cybersecurity up to the highest level. Okay, it has always been considered a secondary option, and that has also, created a domino effect, especially in the COVID period, when a lot of people basically traversed from working in office where they had a more secure based environment to transitioning to a more convenient yet less secure work environment, especially for organizations, that would be the work from home. So cybercrime has increased exponentially since the pandemic basically started about 2 years ago. Now, as you can see here, based on the statistics we have, which is coming from the one brief for 2021, cyber attacks have been number one, okay, data breaches specifically. Second in that particular list is, of course, business interruption, okay. An example of business interruption, of course, would have been the pandemic or natural disasters, such as katulad ng nangyari noong 2020, nung pumutok ang Taal volcano. And months after that one, yung pandemic. How they say, the business community is basically doing in the organization. But as you can see, based on these particular numbers that we have right here, cybersecurity is actually top on the list. Now, moving forward in that particular score, just to give you guys additional information about this, these are, how do you say, analytical numbers that we had for 2021 again. IT disruption has been considered number one, as it has been for 2020. Data compromised, again, second on the list. And another thing that has actually increased in terms of its status is resilience to risk. Theft and fraud basically has dropped. Third-party risk has also dropped. But conducting risk, and as you can see here, regulatory risk, okay, total risk, ay mga umangat. All right, so these are, how do you say, very alarming items that, again, organizations cannot ignore. And this is one of the things that we have been, how do you say, to a certain degree, advocating through the Cybercrime Division under Secretary Mancao. Now, moving forward in that particular score, I'd like to add some facts. In 2019 to 2021, in terms of the loss the country has actually faced, now these are based on press reports, but of course, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar that sometimes information that basically hits the internet, they try to suppress so that it doesn't basically hit a panic mode. But as you can see here, close to about 2 billion pesos, okay, have been lost in digital fraud, banking fraud. In addition to that one, the Philippines, unfortunately, ranked 6th in 2021, June, in terms of the volume of human-initiated cyber attacks. Okay, now this was by Nessus, okay, statistics. On top of that one, in terms of online trafficking that has been reported to the NCMEC, okay, and the CTR, there has been a large report, okay, of how do you say, cases, reported cases relating to either missing or exploited children, okay, which is also circulating on the internet, and in a lot of cases circulating in a particular form of the internet, which is what we refer to as the dark or deeper web. And as you can see here, the number is raised from 2019 from 400, roughly about 400,000, okay, to 2020 to 1.2 million. And for the, how do you say, the recent months or the recent year of 2021, it went up to 2.8 million. Okay, so again, these are very startling numbers. Malware and hijacking attacks have also surged, okay, as what I mentioned to you guys previously, in 2020, by close to or more than 2,000%. Okay, so again, another startling issue. Just to say, how to say, closer to our facts here, back in 2019, the Philippines basically placed 5th, okay, as the most likely to be attacked, okay, in terms of the statistics that were basically garnered. Now, again, these particular numbers are very startling and very alarming, especially given the fact that the majority of Filipinos are using a lot of social media and trying to acclimatize themselves in the cyber world, but of course with the lack of skills and knowledge and the lack of cybersecurity awareness. Now, in terms of the consequences, especially for organizations, now specifically for organizations, ano po yung mga pwede mangyari sa atin pag nagkaroon tayo ng cyber breach? Kasi kadalasan ngayon na nagiging major issue at syempre nagiging target din para sa atin, sa mga hackers, dun sa, I would say, black hat hackers, is of course in regards to how to say, the cyber breach, where we're actually trying to steal, okay, electronic data. Again, as I was mentioning to you guys, data actually is pretty much the gold that we have today, okay, the electronic gold. These particular breaches, again, that shouldn't be taken for granted, do have their, how to say, their associated penalties and imprisonments. Classic example here that we have locally in the Philippines, certain penalties relating to different types of violations could range from 6 months all the way up to 6 years, with a fine of 100,000 pesos all the way up to 4 million pesos. And these are items that are basically indicated under Republic Act 173, which is the Data Privacy Act. Okay, now, given these particular facts, how do we prevent cyber attacks? Well, this is where, in a sense, I kind of, try to figure out what would be the best way to formulate, especially given the landscape that we have here in the country. And one of the things that I saw that, in a way, differentiated us quite vastly, and I would say by more than a mile, okay, to put it bluntly, is developing habits, okay, in terms of how we take cybersecurity, especially as a cybersecurity professional. Okay, it's very, very important that we cultivate that mentality of continuous improvement, continuous learning. In addition to that, as what John Kindervag used to talk about relating to zero trust, and when we had a joint, how to say, event that was hosted last year here in the Philippines virtually, one of the items that I couldn't agree with him more was in terms of the interoperability of systems, okay, in ensuring basically how different types of systems work together and provide the necessary requirements that we need in obtaining or achieving basically the goals that we require for the organization. Another aspect that has also been a major, how do I say, disadvantage, not just for the government sector, but for the private sector as well, is the solid compilation, okay, of documentation, okay, as to how certain activities and procedures and policies, as well as guidelines, should be handled. Now, as the fourth item that I hopefully will be able to complete in my lesson 1 hour discussion, is of course the governance, okay, and development. Now, it's kind of strange, you know, as we hear, given that the election's back again, okay, and all the politicians now have a chance to basically speak their mind. One of the craziest things that I constantly hear coming from politicians today is the constant clamor that we have so many laws, and yet a lot of these particular laws are not actually being governed or not being, how they say, pushed. And this is one of the things too where we have lacked considerably, especially in the cybersecurity landscape. And I'm sure a lot of viewers would agree that are attending this particular event that are also in the cybersecurity sector have seen and could attest to these kinds of situations, which of course is pretty scary. Now, actually, the way how I formed it was with one of the best authors, I would say, that improved how to say my work mentality and work ethics and the way I basically do things, and a lot of how to say leadership seminars have been conducted on this. I'm not so sure if you guys are familiar with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, there was a very good write-up, which I basically, in a sense, applied in this particular presentation, which I hope will be beneficial to you guys, on where they applied the 7 habits on the cybersecurity realm. Okay, so let's kick off basically with the first particular habit. Okay, now this is coming again from Stephen Covey, being proactive. Now, what is it when we say that we want to be proactive? We want to be able to perform a certain action to mitigate or to avoid a certain issue from occurring. Okay, so an example here would be I'd install an antivirus. That would be a proactive approach. Or I would install an antivirus on my phone. You know, majority of a lot of people I've been speaking to that work in, how to say, quote unquote, highly confidential sectors in the government, and even for those in the private sector, don't have antiviruses installed on their smartphones, which is again a means as an endpoint device to a possible cyber attack. And the majority of, how they say, cyber attacks right now are actually targeted on mobile devices, apart from, of course, web-based devices, because they're the ones that are, in a way, in majority. Okay, so when we talk about being proactive, a lot of people basically think that, hey, you know, as an organization, that maybe basically the item that we have right here, you could easily get lost, okay, literally, in terms of that technical mindset, okay, by dealing with so many issues in an organization, from threats, vulnerabilities, incidents, okay, possibly even regulations, negative press, okay, misinformation, blockers, budgetary issues, okay, resource constraints, major issue too, okay. So every minute spent reactively, okay, or reactively waiting around for a better thing to happen to you, you might as well then, it becomes an advantage for your attacker to actually capitalize on the vulnerability. Same concept. The longer you don't install an antivirus in your phone, the larger the smartphone. Okay, some of you guys may be saying, well, I got an old Nokia 3110 or I got a 5110. Goodness, I don't know where you guys basically have been for so many years. So, but if you do have that, well, hey, you're still secure, okay, to a certain degree. But with regards to Android and iOS-based phones that pretty much everyone, majority of people now are using, these are vulnerable, okay, or susceptible to issues because it does have an operating system running. And in that particular ground, you're actually just waiting for an issue to happen, okay, where something basically gets installed on your phone, or you basically click a certain link on the internet or receive a certain link from wherever it might be coming from that could be malicious, and at the end of the day, basically infecting your mobile device. And once you have, let's say, your mobile device, you connect it, let's say, to your computer through USB or whatever particular means, it basically spreads that issue, okay? It spreads that malware. So again, this is where, from a reactive approach, a lot of people would say that, okay, since I haven't been infected, everything's A-okay, all set to go, not a problem. But the moment they get basically infected, that's when they start getting reactive. And by getting reactive, it starts making a bigger issue. And that's where they start basically complaining and regretting, okay? All right, so the other aspect here is to begin with the end in mind. You always want to have a goal, okay, in regards to where you want to be, how you want to basically run your defense. A lot of cases too, in terms of our landscape locally, is people don't understand basically that when you try to secure data, you have to be able to understand how data flows. Okay, what is the process of how data basically traverses within your network, out to your network, and coming into your network, okay? And by understanding basically this simple concept, it gives you now a better perspective as to how you'll be implementing the necessary controls supported by the necessary tools. Now, it's kind of an interesting thing that I'd like to share with you guys with regards to, how they say, a couple of issues here, like, of course, we have been in the private organization, basically working as either administrator, network administrator, security administrator, or the whatnots. And as you work in either a multinational or I'd say a Fortune 500 company here in the Philippines, you'll be working with vendors. And one of the aspects working with vendors is that you'll be basically dealing with the proof of concepts, testing their application, testing their, let's say, antivirus, their endpoint protection systems, testing basically whatever particular software they're doing. But one of the major issues that, once we see a major product that we really like, we don't fully capitalize on it when we actually roll it out into the, into the production-based environment, okay? And most of the time, we end up basically just using 20% of the capabilities that we're actually paying for. Classic example there, I've seen organizations, they have Active Directory running, but they never realize that there are certain controls that you can already set in Active Directory using a Microsoft-based platform, okay, that they just didn't know existed, okay, or they didn't really care. As soon as they had the system basically working, they had the type of mentality that, okay, I can do that one tomorrow, I can do that one next week, but they never actually fulfilled the primary objective. So it's very important that you have to determine, okay, where you want to go, okay? So as indicated here, whilst being proactive is essential, we can't just randomly act and hope for the best, okay? We must know what the end goal should be and start with a clear destination in mind. This applies whether you're basically a newly appointed CISO, okay, to an organization in the need of a radical security change. And that's what pretty much we're faced with in the landscape that we have here locally in the country. Okay, or even as a technical expert, you don't even have to be a CISO. A lot of organizations, even here locally, still don't have CISOs. Okay, and they have to basically understand, okay, what's my plan? What's my what do I want to achieve? What do I want to be able to fulfill? Okay, now I'm not going to go into the side here with regards to operations. I'll focus more specifically on the individuals per se. But you guys can read up on this one. There are supporting informations on this one here. I'll be sharing with you guys the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll just focus on this sector because of time constraints. Third particular habit that a cybersecurity individual must have, okay, is again applying the put first things first. Okay, learn how to prioritize. It's a very important thing. Okay, now again, a lot of people, I don't know if you guys ever heard the expression or the saying, basically, swimming in data is pretty much drowning for wisdom. Okay, what it means there is you get bombarded with so much information, especially if you're understaffed, and that's typically how to say where we are faced with. And I don't know if you guys feel the same thing that I felt with as I've been working with different companies throughout the years, and of course in the different sectors of the government, where you're expected, because you're the IT guy, that you're going to do everything. You'll be from technician to the security guy to the person that may even be there to teach them how to use their phone. Okay, and that's one of the, how to say, the eyebrow raising issues. Okay, where organizations again take this particular sector again for granted. So it's very important that, of course, given that we may be short of resources, under-resourced, and may not have the full capabilities, we have to be able to understand how are we going to be able to prioritize certain activities that we're faced with within the organization. Okay, so this is just an example of how Stephen Covey actually did it for an individual. I'm not just talking about cybersecurity. You apply this one to in your own personal life. And when we apply basically the items that we have here, which is what we refer to as the Eisenhower type matrix, we have 4 different quadrants. Now, the 4 different quadrants, you have here on the side basically the level of urgency, which is not important and important. Or sorry, the level of classification, and the level of urgency, which is at the very top, okay, which is time bound. So as you can see here, quadrant 1, we have the due. Okay, what do we mean specifically by due? Important deadlines, and that is basically on a level of crisis. So if you have a cyber breach, that goes into quadrant 1. Okay, quadrant 2 that we have here is basically planning. Okay, so when we talk about planning, this is basically urgent, or sorry, it's not urgent, but it is important. So as you can see here, it's not urgent, it's important. And we, on top of that one, have quadrant 3, okay, which is where we have the ability to be able to delegate. Okay, this is again something that may be urgent, but it may not be important, and we can basically set that one through certain deadlines. It's not like with quadrant 1 where we have to act immediately. Okay, then we have, of course, quadrant 4, okay, which is not urgent and not important. So in a way, it's pretty much a distraction. Okay. Now, moving forward on that particular score, we also have what we refer to as the think win-win. Okay. Now, when we talk about thinking win-win, let's try to take the example here specifically in threat intelligence. Okay. When we try to offer certain products or services, okay, to either an organization as a vendor or basically as an in-house consultant or in-house cybersecurity lead, you have to be able to identify what basically works, okay, for the department and what also works for the organization in general. Now, as one of the speakers were mentioning or talking about earlier today, it actually, clicked perfectly when we address, management, when we try to propose certain solutions within an organization. Let's say, for example, running a basic firewall that only does IP filtering to upgrading it to, let's say, an application level firewall. From, let's say, an EEP-based platform going to an EPR-based platform. Okay, so, but again, the importance here is how are you able to communicate so that they know that it is beneficial for you, that would help you facilitate, protecting their needs. Okay, it's not just to help you ease your job, it's also to be able to help you fix basically or ensure that level of security within the organization. And you have to have that level of, how do you say, you have to have that skill, that ability that you're capable of communicating this information in very basic language, so that they see it from your own perspective, from your own paradigm of thinking, and that's a very important aspect. I did actually include that in the slide presentation when we talk about the way of how we deal with paradigm thinking. Because from a non-technical perspective, people think of cybersecurity as an expense because they don't know what it is. And sometimes because they don't know what it is, they're too scared. They don't even want to hear it, but from someone that is familiar, it gets really frightening. You're like having a multinational organization and you don't even have a proper layer 7 firewall. You don't even have, let's say, VPN communication. You're still using legacy-based technologies such as Telnet, FTP. So now that becomes an area of concern because you're aware of it, and this is something that's concerning. But from an executive position, they wouldn't even know what FTP is. They wouldn't even know what Telnet is. So it doesn't really make sense. So that's why it's important that you convey the message on a win-win basis. Okay, another thing that also we have to take into account, which is the 5th habit, is seek first to understand, then be understood. Now, this is again, I would say, in conjunction to the 4th habit, but with the 5th habit, we have to be able to understand the perspective of where the company is coming from. We may be saying that, hey, we want to be able to buy a multi-million-dollar platform. But what happens if the organization cannot sustain it, cannot afford it? So we have to basically first understand what is our state, where are we at, before we start basically saying that, hey, this is what I want you to understand. This is what I want you to basically accept. And it's like you're pushing that information down your throat. So you have to have that level of ability that you want to basically convey. Before you start conveying messages to people, you understand what are the issues. Again, it's a classic example here is you can't give a solution if you don't know what the problem is, to simplify it. All right, the 6th habit of cybersecurity defense professionals would be, of course, synergize. Now, it's very important that when you're working in a cybersecurity team, you work as a team member. I've always done that even with my own team members, and I always remind them and tell them that, hey, there's no I in team, Now, some of you may be philosophical and say that, hey, there's AM, M, that refers to you as a single individual. But no, there is no I in a team. That means to say there's no one person, in a team. If you're an individual, you're solo. But when you have 2 or more individuals, you have to learn how to be able to collaborate with each other. You have to be able to, to work in a environment where there is harmony. You don't want to make an enemy of the person that you're working with because they're not going to be able to help you. What happens if that individual is basically in charge of monitoring, your CM environment? And you, on the other hand, are basically focused primarily as a red teamer. Okay, your primary objective is to do threat intelligence and to be able to do, how they say, a VAPT. But because you and the other person aren't in good terms, he doesn't communicate with you information that could be important to the organization in general. And that basically could affect the department of your Security Operations Center or your SNOC, okay, Security Network Operations Center, as a lot of organizations are now working on. And of course, look very negatively in the eyes of the stakeholders, which should be the executive board. Now, the seventh habit here is sharpen the saw. And I love the sharpen the saw because especially when you're in the cybersecurity realm, this is something that I'd like to quote here, okay, before I go into the cybersecurity realm. A quote from Abraham Lincoln. And it goes by saying that, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. What do we mean by that? I'm going to make sure that I'm ready first. I'm going to make sure that I'm prepared first before I start performing certain action. It would be a classic example where I see a lot of people that do VAPT, or how do say, cybersecurity in general. These, go to a lot of people. Sometimes we have, how do say, difference of opinions with, where they don't take, training, or they don't take the full context of how, let's say, cybersecurity actually works. I'll cite a classic example here where people want to dive straight into cybersecurity, but they don't have the prerequisites of networking. And when you start, because I've been in the trading field for so many years now, I've seen that kind of situation time and time again, where students start attending basically classes, and you start talking to them about ports. You start telling them, okay, this is how we're basically going to be reading packets from Wireshark and so on and so forth. And you got a blank face. You're like, what are you talking about? I'm seeing all these numbers, hexadecimals and stuff like that, and it's making my stomach turn, and now I can't deal with that. It's because they don't understand it. And why is it they don't understand it? Because they didn't do the prerequisites. They didn't prepare for it. So now imagine if you're trying to run a security operations center and you don't have the necessary foundation to basically deal with a cybersecurity center. How will you operate it in the way it should be run? You have to be able to prepare. You have to be able to meet the prerequisites. If you don't have the prerequisites, you have to be able to put that additional effort in and understand how it works. Now, it's the same thing like, with a lot of people that want to go into cybersecurity hacking, which is more of the red team. Majority here, I'd say probably 90% of the Philippine landscape focuses primarily on red team, not necessarily blue team, which is one of the reasons why I chose the blue teaming topic. And if you're running in the red team, which some of you guys may be able to relate with, okay, there is so much information that you have to constantly keep up to pace with. And honestly speaking, I'm already giving up, okay, especially with my age and, they say, the amount of hours that you have to sit down and study, and I'm getting too old for this. But from that perspective, imagine if you're away for a month, 2 months. That's almost like an eternity in terms of what additional vulnerabilities could have come up, what additional items that you need to learn in terms of the new tools, okay, that you could be using, that may not be detectable when, let's say, you do a VAPT exercise. Okay, so there's so many things that you have to constantly keep up to breast, that you have to keep yourself up to breast. okay, up to pace with it. So in these kinds of circumstances, continuous learning is there, which is why sharpening the saw is a major importance as part of the habit of a cybersecurity professional. And I hope that basically gives you guys a major, how do you say, um, understanding of what are the habits that you would typically need as a cybersecurity professional. Okay, maybe in the red team, maybe in the blue team. Now, the last item in dealing with sharpening the saw, okay, is ensuring that you also have the ability to be able to devote time to literally just freshen up, renew yourself. Okay, I remember back in the old Fox Pro days, okay, we had this term called disform refresh, and we used to use that one for those Fox Pro programmers, that term constantly, where literally you just want to refresh the entire form. You just want to refresh the screen, okay, because you're going to start from scratch. And if you constantly work on a basis where you're not giving yourself enough time to heal, okay, to renew, whatever goes in here, this is what I always tell my team members, my staff members underneath me, that whatever goes in here, it's just going to go literally out the other year. Okay, I was going to say out this side, okay, but no, one here, all the way out there, okay? You're not going to be able to retain it because you're just exhausted. Now, I've actually experienced times where, I'd be just typing things there on, let's say, a Kali box or a Parrot box or any of these particular machines, and I just don't even know what I'm typing. I just thought my brain's just basically left me because I reached a point of exhaustion. And there are statistical reports here, okay, back in 2019, that many CISOs basically burned out, with 27% surveyed working up to 60 hours a week. 89%, okay, never even taking a 2-week break, okay, from their job. I remember when I was still working for an organization, for Accenture, actually. I remember, when you're an on-call individual, you'd literally have to work, okay, on that basis, okay, where Monday all the way up to Friday, you work your regular hours, then Saturday, Sunday, even if you're, let's say, a manager, okay, you'd still be on call. And if there would be a 781 issue, whether you like it or not, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you are required to join the bridge call. It's part of your requirement. Okay, I see Sir Amart saying 5 minutes. Okay, so almost done. Well, actually, I'm not going to say I'm almost done. There are a lot of things here that I would like to actually discuss, but let me go over to the last part now. There are areas here, okay, in terms of, this one I'm just going to run through. There was a couple of items here about SOC, but I'm not going to go into that because I think based on the, how do you say, the discussion flow, there will be discussions relating to SOC later on the day. In terms of the requirement for skills development, which is a very important aspect, you have to be able to take the flow as it is actually defined. Now, there are a number of different, how do you say, certifying bodies out there. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen, from CompTIA, you have Easy Council, you have ISACA, IC Squared, SANS, okay, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to even mention all of them, but it's important to understand who is based in the market, okay, the most respected, okay, because that respect goes a long way because the standards are there, okay, and that's of course with I'd say the new Pentest Plus that basically came up, and with the CISA 002 of CompTIA. They've actually done themselves, a great deed. They have updated the curriculum, pretty much matching a lot. But again, I'm hoping, as this is what we have been constantly talking about, even with the regional directors and the heads of CompTIA, when they're going to be able to create the virtual lab environment for actual, okay, hands-on certifying or certification exams. Okay, because everything right now is all multiple choice and performance based. But I'm hoping the time will come that they will be able to actually create this virtual exam environment. So when you go through the CompTIA certification track, I highly suggest that you guys go through the either ITF or A+. If you have hardware knowledge, kudos. Then go over to Network Plus, Security Plus, and then you do have a number of different options. But for the cybersecurity track, you have Pentest for red teaming, you have CISA for the blue teaming, and of course you have the highest level of certification for CompTIA, which is the CASP certification. Now, I've taken the CASP 003, if I recall correctly. It wasn't an easy, how to say, way into it. Okay, it was actually, how to say, a pretty tough exam, but because it tests you on pretty much a number. Although they say it's 5 domains, it tests you basically on the financial and the technical side. Okay, so the leadership aspect as well as the technical aspects are pretty much tested under the CASP certification, and that's what makes it very challenging. Now, there are a number of different roles that you have, okay, that you'll be able to achieve, as you can see. Now, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, or sorry, I don't think I did mention that one. There is a major difference between cyber security and IT security or information security. Information security basically covers everything in general. Cyber security, on the other hand, and this is a very important term for you guys to understand, is where you specifically have focus on. So you can be a cybersecurity professional dealing with web-based technologies. You can be a cybersecurity professional dealing with mobile technology, with secure coding, with networks, wireless, okay, IoT. There's so many things coming up right now. And literally it's impossible for you to be able to understand everything. Okay, I just wouldn't believe that. You know, as they say, there's no such thing as a jack of all trades, because at the end of the day, he's a master of none. And this is where you have to literally dive in, focus on where you want to specialize in the long term. And with that, basically, I'd like to thank you all. I see that my time has been up. If you do have any questions, my email address is as indicated here, mark@legeza.hknl2022. Thank you very much, everyone. Fabian?
All right, thank you so much for that, Mr. Mark Legeza.
So we would like to ask you to stay for a bit for our question and answer portion. So for our participants, you may drop your questions on the comment section of our social media platforms. So,
and while we are waiting for the questions from our audience, we will now choose our winners of Hknl2022 shirts and LPI shirts, Globe merchandise for the best write-ups for Mr. Mark's topic. Right, so we actually have here our first winner, Chester Carl Baranda, I'm sorry.
Mark Hadrian Odasco, Matet Prenda, and Mr. Edsel Vertusio Manawag. So congratulations, guys. Kindly message us on our Facebook page to claim your prizes.
All right, and for the questions, do we have any questions for Mr. Mark?
So we have here one question, Mr. Mark. So it goes like this. What CompTIA course would you recommend for beginners to take if he wants to be a penetration tester?
Network Plus. I just went there really fast. You got to go Network Plus. If you don't know anything about networking, don't even think about taking cybersecurity. If you don't know how to deal with subnets, port addresses, any of that one, trust me, you'll have a bigger problem when you go into cybersecurity, because you're going to be dealing with that every day. You do, how do you say, vulnerability scans using, let's say, Nmap. You're going to be prompted with a port, and if, let's say, you don't even know what that port is, how would you then perform an exploitation? So network is the numero uno.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mr. Mark Legeza.
Thank you very much.
We actually have another question from our participants.
Oh, of course. Go ahead.
So it goes like this from Miss Matet Brenda. What fundamentals, for example, software or technical, would you recommend that students must be equipped with equipped with to prepare them for an infosec or cybersecurity.
Sorry. So the question is, what particular tools should they have to prepare for InfoSec?
Right. What fundamentals
Would you recommend?
would you recommend? Would you recommend that students must be equipped? So it's for software and technical skills.
Okay, if we're talking about fundamentals, I'm not really sure what they mean by the fundamentals, but you have to know networking. If you're looking for the tools, you basically can, if you go through the CompTIA trainings with, of course, CompTIA's certified partners, they do have a special package there where they have what we call the CertMaster Learn, okay, sorry, the CertMaster Labs. You actually have one entire year where you can basically deal with an entire virtual lab environment. So you don't have to spend money by upgrading your computer. But if you go where you have a good enough computer, let's say you have an i7 with 32 gigabytes of memory, or even 16, that should pretty much do. You could actually run your own virtual labs, run either VMware, if you have a license for that one. If you don't, run VirtualBox, download Kali, download basically the operating systems that you can get your hands on for 128-day evaluation from Microsoft's website, and basically create your own lab environment. Use GNS3, they are free tools. Use Packet Tracer, enhance your skills at least from that particular level.